Hey there, parents! Let's talk about something that's probably been on your mind more times than you can count: sleep. Specifically, your child's sleep. You know those nights when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering, is my little one getting enough sleep? Or maybe you've been woken up one too many times by a restless toddler, and you're starting to feel like a walking zombie yourself. Trust me, you're not alone. Sleep, or the lack of it, is one of those universal parenting challenges that can leave even the most seasoned moms and dads feeling a little frazzled. But here's the thing: sleep isn't just about getting through the day without meltdowns. Though, let's be honest, that's a huge bonus. It's about so much more. Sleep plays a critical role in your child's growth, development, and overall well-being. From boosting their immune system to helping their brains process all the new things they're learning, good sleep is like a superpower for kids. And as parents, it's our job to help them harness that superpower. So, in this video, we're diving into everything you need to know about your child's sleep. We'll cover how much sleep they really need, how to create a bedtime routine that actually works, and some common sleep challenges. Plus, of course, how to tackle them. By the end of this, you'll have a clear roadmap to help your child, and maybe even you, get the rest you all deserve. Let's start with the basics. How much sleep does your child actually need? You might be surprised to learn that the answer changes as they grow. For example, newborns need a whopping 14 to 17 hours of sleep a day, while toddlers typically need around 11 to 14 hours. School-aged kids, on the other hand, usually require about 9 to 12 hours. And teenagers? Well, they still need a solid 8 to 10 hours, even if they act like they're invincible and don't need sleep at all. The key here is to pay attention to your child's individual needs. Some kids might thrive on the lower end of those ranges, while others might need every last minute to feel their best. Now, let's talk about one of the most important tools in your sleep toolkit: a consistent bedtime routine. I know. Life gets busy, and sticking to a routine can feel like just one more thing on your never-ending to-do list. But here's why it's worth it. A predictable routine signals to your child's brain that it's time to wind down and get ready for sleep. It doesn't have to be complicated either. Something as simple as brushing teeth, reading a short story, and saying goodnight can work wonders. The key is consistency. Doing the same things in the same order every night helps create a sense of security and calm, which makes it easier for your child to drift off. And speaking of calm, let's talk about the sleep environment. This is another big one. Think about it. Would you be able to fall asleep easily in a room that's too bright, too noisy, or too cluttered? Probably not. The same goes for your child. Creating a sleep-friendly environment can make a world of difference. Start by keeping the room cool, dark, and quiet. Blackout curtains can be a game changer if your child's room gets a lot of light, and a white noise machine can help drown out any distracting sounds. Oh, and don't forget about comfort. A cozy mattress, soft bedding, and maybe even a favorite stuffed animal can help your child feel safe and relaxed. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds great, but what if my child just won't stay in bed? Ah, yes, the classic bedtime battle. It's a scenario every parent has faced at some point. You tuck them in, say goodnight, and just as you're about to sit down and finally relax, you hear those little footsteps padding down the hallway. Sound familiar? If so, you're not alone. This is one of the most common sleep challenges parents face, and the good news is, there are ways to handle it. One approach is to set clear boundaries and stick to them. For example, you might say, "After we say goodnight, it's time to stay in bed." If your child gets up, calmly walk them back to bed without engaging in a long conversation. It might take a few nights, or even a few weeks, of consistency, but eventually they'll get the message. Now that we've talked about the basics, how much sleep your child needs, the importance of a bedtime routine, and creating a sleep-friendly environment, let's dive into some of the trickier aspects of kids' sleep. Because let's face it, even with the best routines and the coziest bedrooms, there are still those nights when things just don't go as planned. Maybe your child wakes up in the middle of the night, or they're struggling to fall asleep because their mind is racing. Or perhaps you're dealing with a little one who thinks the crack of dawn is the perfect time to start the day. Sound familiar? Don't worry, we've got you covered. First up, let's talk about night wakings. If you've ever been jolted awake at 2 a.m. by a tiny voice calling out for you, you know how exhausting this can be. Night wakings are completely normal, especially for younger kids, but that doesn't mean you're doomed to sleepless nights forever. One of the best ways to handle this is to teach your child how to self-soothe. Now, I know that phrase can sound a little clinical, but it's really just about helping your child learn to fall back asleep on their own. For example, if your child wakes up and calls for you, try to give them a minute or two before responding. Sometimes they'll settle back down on their own. If they don't, keep your response calm and brief. A quick reassurance like, "It's okay, I'm here, go back to sleep," can be enough to help them feel secure without fully waking them up. Over time, this can help reduce the number of night wakings and make them less disruptive for everyone. Of course, night wakings aren't the only sleep challenge parents face. Another big one is managing screen time before bed. We live in a world where screens are everywhere, and let's be honest, sometimes handing over a tablet or turning on the TV feels like the only way to get a moment of peace. But here's the thing, screens and sleep don't mix well. The blue light emitted by screens can interfere with the production of melatonin, the hormone that helps us feel sleepy. Plus, the content your child is watching, whether it's an exciting cartoon or a fast-paced video game, can stimulate their brain and make it harder for them to wind down. So, what's the solution? Try to establish a screen-free zone at least an hour before bedtime. Instead, encourage quieter activities like reading, drawing, or even listening to calming music. If your child absolutely needs some screen time, consider using blue light filters or glasses to minimize the impact. Now, let's talk about early risers. You know the type. The kids who are up at the crack of dawn, full of energy and ready to start the day, while you're still desperately clinging to those last few moments of sleep. If this sounds like your household, you're not alone. Early rising is a common issue, especially with younger kids. One way to tackle this is to make sure your child's room is as dark as possible in the early morning hours. Sometimes, even a little bit of light creeping in can signal to your child that it's time to wake up. Blackout curtains can be a lifesaver here. Another strategy is to use a wake-up light or an OK-to-wake clock. These devices use light or sound to let your child know when it's an appropriate time to get out of bed. For example, you might set the light to turn green at 6:30 a.m. and explain to your child that they need to stay in bed until the light changes. It might take some time for them to get the hang of it, but with consistency, it can be a game changer. And then there's the issue of bedtime resistance. You know the drill. It's time for bed, but suddenly your child needs a drink of water, a snack, one more story. And, oh, by the way, they're not tired at all. Sound familiar? Bedtime resistance is incredibly common, but there are ways to handle it without turning every night into a battle. One approach is to give your child some control over their bedtime routine. For example, you might let them choose which pajamas to wear or which book to read. This can help them feel more invested in the process and less likely to push back. Another tip is to set clear expectations and stick to them. If you've agreed on 2 stories, make it clear that once those stories are done, it's time for lights out. And if your child tries to negotiate, stay calm but firm. Consistency is key here. The more you stick to the plan, the easier it will become over time. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great, but what if my child has a nightmare or is scared of the dark? Ah, yes. Nighttime fears. These are completely normal, especially for younger kids, but they can be tough to handle. If your child is scared of the dark, consider using a nightlight. Just make sure it's a soft, warm light that won't interfere with their sleep. If they're having nightmares, take some time during the day to talk about what's bothering them. All right, we're in the home stretch now. We've covered so much already. How much sleep your child needs, creating a bedtime routine, setting up a sleep-friendly environment, and tackling common challenges like night wakings, screen time, and early rising. But before we wrap things up, There are a few more important points to touch on. Because let's be honest, sleep is a journey, not a one-time fix. And as your child grows, their sleep needs and challenges will evolve too. So, let's dive into these final tips to make sure you're fully equipped to handle whatever comes your way. First, let's talk about sleep regressions. If you've never heard this term before, consider yourself lucky, because sleep regressions can be a real doozy. Essentially, a sleep regression is when a child who has been sleeping well suddenly starts waking up more frequently or having trouble falling asleep. These regressions often happen around major developmental milestones, like learning to crawl, walk, or talk. They can also occur during times of change, like starting daycare or moving to a new house. The good news is, sleep regressions are usually temporary. The key is to stay consistent with your routines and not introduce new habits, like bringing your child into your bed, that might be hard to break later. It's tough, I know, but hang in there. This too shall pass. Next, let's talk about the role of diet in sleep. You might not realize it, but what your child eats and drinks can have a big impact on how well they sleep. For example, sugary snacks or drinks close to bedtime can make it harder for your child to settle down. On the flip side, certain foods can actually promote better sleep. Foods rich in tryptophan, like turkey, bananas, and dairy products, can help boost melatonin production. And complex carbohydrates, like whole grain bread or oatmeal, can help keep blood sugar levels stable throughout the night. Of course, it's also important to make sure your child isn't going to bed hungry. A light, healthy snack about an hour before bedtime can help prevent those midnight hunger pangs. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's just as important as your child's sleep: your sleep. Because let's face it, parenting is exhausting, and if you're not getting enough rest, it's going to be a lot harder to handle the challenges that come your way. I know it's easier said than done, but try to prioritize your own sleep as much as possible. That might mean going to bed a little earlier, taking naps when you can, or asking for help from your partner or a family member so you can catch up on rest. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. And while we're on the topic of self-care, let's talk about stress. Parenting is stressful, and that stress can sometimes spill over into your child's sleep. If you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, your child might pick up on that and have a harder time settling down. So, take a deep breath and remind yourself that it's okay to not have all the answers. Parenting is a learning process, and you're doing the best you can. If you're feeling really stressed, consider talking to a friend, family member, or even a therapist. Sometimes just having someone to vent to can make a world of difference. Finally, let's talk about the importance of flexibility. While routines and consistency are key, it's also important to recognize that life happens. There will be nights when things don't go according to plan. Maybe you're traveling, or your child is sick, or you're just having one of those days. And that's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. If you have a rough night, don't beat yourself up about it. Just pick up where you left off the next day and keep moving forward. So, let's recap what we've covered in this video. We've talked about how much sleep your child needs, the importance of a consistent bedtime routine, and how to create a sleep-friendly environment. We've tackled common challenges like night wakings, screen time, early rising, and bedtime resistance. And we've explored some final tips, like handling sleep regressions, the role of diet in sleep, and taking care of your own sleep needs as a parent. Whew, that's a lot. But here's the thing, you don't have to do it all at once. Start small, pick one or two things to focus on, and build from there. Remember, small changes can make a big difference over time. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. What's been your biggest sleep challenge as a parent? Have you tried any of the tips we've talked about today? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more tips and advice on raising happy, healthy kids. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, you're doing an amazing job. Parenting isn't easy, but you've got this.